Just a week ago I, a 36-year-old woman, cheated on my husband, a 39-year-old man, with my floor supervisor, a man in his 50s. It's painful to admit, but I believe in taking responsibility for my actions. Let me provide some context. My husband and I were supposed to attend a work party together, but our babysitter canceled, leaving my husband to care for our child at home. I made the decision to go to the party alone and ended up spending the night at a hotel with my supervisor. Looking back, I can now see how my behavior was already a sign of the mess I was about to create. There was an odd tension between me and my supervisor ever since he was transferred to the same floor where I work a few months ago. My husband, who works on the floor below, easily picked up on this tension. I reassured my husband that there was nothing to worry about, even though I felt the strange tension myself. I was also deceiving myself, attempting to ignore the growing unease within me. That night, my supervisor swept me off my feet with compliments about my appearance, my choice of attire, and one thing led to another, eventually leading us to a hotel room a few blocks away from the party location. My husband's instincts were not wrong, and I remained there until the early morning. When I returned home, my husband was waiting for me. He inquired about why I was at the X hotel when the party was scheduled at the Y hotel. Regrettably, I had forgotten that we share our locations through a location-sharing app. I couldn't deny it any longer. I had cheated on him, and I had been planning it for weeks, fully aware of the consequences it would have on our family. It wasn't a spontaneous mistake, it was a deliberate choice, and now I must face the repercussions. Our marriage wasn't perfect, but I had no right to betray his trust in this manner. I've been grappling with low self-esteem and body image concerns ever since I gave birth last year. Shedding the baby weight has proven to be a challenge, and it's made me feel less attractive. I must confess that my husband fits the typical male stereotype and hasn't been very attentive to my struggles. I've been hitting the gym in recent weeks and managed to lose a few pounds, but he hardly seemed to notice. Our sex life has become less exciting and fulfilling, especially since we're both exhausted from looking after our energetic toddler. I understand that none of these factors can excuse my actions, but I believe they provide important context. On that particular night, I let go of my inhibitions because I longed to feel desired, attractive, and sexy again. Knowing that my actions have hurt him and our family deeply fills me with guilt. We've had our share of ups and downs, but I genuinely love him. While I can't undo what I've done, I'm fully committed to making amends. He's willing to grant me a second chance. He's experienced the pain of his parents' divorce and is determined not to let our child become a victim of my actions. He asked me to sever all ties with my supervisor, even if it meant giving up a potential career opportunity. I was torn because the job could have advanced my career, but deep down, I knew he was right. It wasn't just about the job, it was about the promises we made. I needed some time to think it over and eventually decided to prioritize my family over the job. I believe it was the right choice. As much as I want to mend our relationship, I recognize the depth of my husband's pain. I've hurt him profoundly, and my actions have left emotional scars. I'm determined to make things right, but navigating the aftermath is challenging. I can feel his anguish, and it's heart-wrenching to realize the extent of the damage to our relationship. I'm thankful that he's willing to give us a chance. Through counseling, I'm committed to being the kind of wife he deserves, but I understand that healing will take time and effort. I'm completely aware of the feelings of inadequacy he's dealing with, and I understand his right to feel that way. It's a difficult situation for him, and I deeply regret putting him in this position. I'm here to make amends, but I'm also being realistic. The path to redemption is lengthy, and there's no assurance that things will return to the way they were. Ultimately, it's about what's best for our family, and I'm ready to do whatever it takes to rebuild trust and respect. Thank you for taking the time to read this. I'm sharing not to seek sympathy but to acknowledge my mistakes and the journey I'm on to make things right. It's a challenging process, but I'm learning every day. A lot has occurred, and I wanted to provide you all with an update on how things have been unfolding. To be honest, the situation has taken an unexpected turn, and I need to share this with you. After my husband and I had that heart-wrenching conversation about my infidelity, I believed we were making progress. We were communicating, attending counseling, and I was genuinely making an effort to demonstrate my remorse. However, things became even more complex. It turns out that my husband went through my call records and discovered that I had been talking to my supervisor for over an hour when I claimed to be at my mother's place. In truth, I was at a mall because I needed privacy for my call. I realize it may sound wrong, but my supervisor was concerned about my professional move to a different floor, and I didn't want my husband to find out about these calls after he explicitly told me not to. So I went to the mall to take the call. This led to me being caught in another lie. I'm still in disbelief that he went through my phone like that. It feels like he doesn't trust me anymore or something. When he confronted me about it, I was taken aback and stumbled through some excuses. However, he wasn't willing to accept it. He packed up our child and left the house. He's currently staying elsewhere, and I'm left here dealing with the mess I've created. Honestly, I've been feeling unheard and neglected ever since he discovered my one-night stand. For the past month, I've been giving him space and tending to his every need, but often he remains distant and emotionally cold. I understand what he's going through, but at times, I also need someone to talk to, and my supervisor was there. It's frustrating because I feel like he hasn't even given me a chance. I'm genuinely trying to make amends, and I've been reflecting on my low self-esteem and the issues I've been facing. Doesn't that count for something? I've learned that my husband is staying with his parents, and honestly, I believe he should handle this situation more maturely without resorting to his parents' support as if he were a child. Taking our child with him is unjustifiable. It feels like he's using them against me. I've tried reaching out to him to initiate a conversation, but he's not responding. It's as if he's shutting me out, and I understand I deserve this treatment, but it still hurts. I acknowledge my mistakes, but I just wish we could go back to resolving our problems through communication instead of being in this state. I feel awful about the entire situation. I'm aware that I've deeply hurt him, and the fact that I continue to be dishonest only adds to the pain. Seeing him so upset is challenging, and I wish I had been more transparent from the start. I comprehend why he's so hurt and angry. Trust is delicate, and I further eroded it. I can't help but ponder my actions and recognize that my attempts to rebuild trust were overshadowed by my lack of honesty. I've come to realize that it's not just about expressing regret, but also about being honest about my actions. I've created a chaotic situation, and I'm ready to face the consequences. Currently, I'm giving my husband the space he requires. It's evident that my behavior has inflicted a great deal of pain, and I want to honor his emotions and boundaries. I hope that with time, we can reach a point of mutual understanding and perhaps find a way to work through this. However, I also understand that it's not entirely within my control. I want to express my gratitude for the support and advice you've provided thus far. It has been enlightening to hear various perspectives, and I am committed to learning from my mistakes and evolving as an individual. I will continue to keep you all informed of the progress. Update. The past few weeks have been extremely tough, and I believe it's crucial to share my struggles with strangers online. Since my husband left with our child, things have taken a more serious turn. Today, he officially served me with divorce papers. The reality of our marriage coming to an end is hitting me hard, and accepting it has been a challenging process. During this period, I haven't had the chance to see our child, which has been one of the most painful aspects of this situation. It's a daily battle knowing I can't be there for him, and I completely understand why my husband is taking this step to protect our child. I hope that with time, I can find a way to rebuild trust and demonstrate that I can be a dependable parent. Furthermore, my family has disowned me. The isolation and loneliness I'm experiencing are overwhelming, and it's a harsh realization of how one mistake can reveal the true colors of those closest to you. As for my supervisor, he's persisted with his advances, but I'm doing my best to maintain a distance. I'm aware of the potential rumors and gossip that could circulate at work, and I want to avoid any further complications. It's crucial for me to uphold my professionalism, especially given the current circumstances. However, I sense that the rumor mill is already in motion. My supervisor has caused tremendous harm to my life as well as my husband's and child's. I feel like a monster. The path ahead is uncertain, but I'm dedicated to learning from my mistakes and striving for a brighter future. I'd like to express my gratitude to those who have offered their support and insights throughout this journey. Alright, that was a fun story. Now let's move on to another exciting one. Stay tuned and let's dive in. My wife and I are both 38 years old. We tied the knot 18 years ago and have been blessed with two wonderful children, a 17-year-old boy and a 16-year-old girl. Our journey began when we met at the age of 19 through mutual friends, and it was love at first sight. Despite our youth and limited finances, our love for each other helped us navigate life's occasional challenges. At that time, I was employed in customer service for an ISP while my wife worked as an assistant coordinator in an office. We managed to secure a nice apartment and owned two decent cars. A few months after our wedding, my wife became pregnant with our son. Coincidentally, I received a promotion to a supervisory role in my department, which came with a significant salary increase. Consequently, we made the decision for my wife to transition into the role of a stay-at-home mom once our son arrived. 1 year after our son's birth, our daughter entered the world. 3 years down the line, we purchased a lovely 4-bedroom starter home in a family-friendly neighborhood. Despite the demands of parenthood, we always made an effort to keep the flame alive in our love life. I couldn't have been prouder of my family and my career achievements, and it felt like we were living the American dream. Life was truly good. However, everything took a dramatic turn. My world came crashing down when I received a voicemail message at the office one day from a woman whom I'll refer to as Mrs. Jones, a pseudonym. In her message, she explained that she was the spouse of a former coworker of my wife and that she had something crucial to discuss with me regarding them. Since I wasn't acquainted with this coworker, I had no inkling about the nature of her call. I promptly returned her call, and she began to divulge news that I knew I wouldn't like. Then she revealed that my wife was involved in an affair with her husband. Mrs. Jones explained that she had just uncovered the affair earlier that week, and her husband had confessed. According to her husband, they had engaged in inappropriate conversations and meetings for over a year, but it had only turned physical in the past week. She stumbled upon this by finding an explicit email exchange between her husband and my wife discussing rendezvous at their house while she was at work. Naturally, I was deeply disturbed by this revelation and initially found it hard to believe. Upon returning home, I was met with my wife in tears, pleading for forgiveness. She was already in full crisis mode, clearly informed by her lover that their secret affair had been exposed and his wife had spoken to me. Before my arrival, my wife had taken our children to my parents' house, claiming she was planning an impromptu date night to surprise me. We both cried uncontrollably for what felt like hours. I had never felt such anguish in my life, both physically and mentally, and my wife was equally distraught. We stayed up all night engaged in tearful conversations. I did a lot of shouting, questioning why she would do this to me and our children. Throughout this emotional turmoil, my wife continuously implored me not to leave her, professing her deep love and profound regret. She confirmed the details of the affair as provided by her paramour and vowed that if I granted her another chance, she would demonstrate herself as the best wife in the world and ensure that I never regretted staying with her. I repeatedly informed her that I could never trust or be intimate with her again and that I desired a divorce. Each time I uttered this, she became hysterical. In the end, I conveyed that I would consider remaining in the marriage only if she agreed to sign a postnuptial agreement. I had read a story some time ago about a man who had implemented such an agreement with his unfaithful wife. I couldn't help but remember that story and the sympathy I had felt for the man and his children, and now I found myself in his shoes. The agreement would detail the affair and stipulate that in the event of a future divorce by either of us following this affair, she would not be eligible for alimony and would only be entitled to 25% of jointly held assets as opposed to the standard 50%. Additionally, we would both maintain 50-50 custody of our children, with the primary residence of the children being with me. I presented her with a choice: accept the postnuptial agreement or proceed with an immediate divorce, in which case she would receive alimony, 50% of the assets, and likely gain primary custody of the kids. She chose to proceed with the postnuptial agreement but requested that we exclude the affair from the document due to her shame. I firmly declined this request, emphasizing that without acknowledging the affair, there would be no foundation for the agreement. However, we did agree to keep the affair confidential between ourselves, a significant mistake, as I'll explain later, and attempt to move forward from it. Nevertheless, I expressed my doubt that we would ever be more than roommates co-parenting our children. She consented to keeping the secret, cried profusely, and vowed to spend her life, if necessary, to regain my trust and unconditional love. In the subsequent week, I consulted a divorce attorney, and within 2 weeks, we had a signed and filed postnuptial agreement in place. Subsequently, I insisted that both of us undergo STD testing and arranged for DNA tests for our children, given my complete lack of trust in her at that point. While the STD panels caused her additional shame and embarrassment, she was deeply saddened and depressed by my request for DNA testing. She swore that the children were mine but eventually agreed to the tests, understanding that my trust in her had plummeted. Over the next 2 years, we endured a wretched existence. We were living a facade, which was toxic to our emotional well-being and sanity. We maintained the pretense with our children, extended family, and friends. My wife kept all her clothing in our master bedroom, and each night, we retired to our bedroom to create the illusion that we were sharing a bed as usual. However, I would then have her discreetly move to the spare bedroom for the night, as I wanted no physical contact with her. For a full 2 years, we never slept in the same bed. In front of our children, family, and friends, we would display affection, holding hands and sharing light kisses on the lips. However, when we were alone, I completely ignored her and treated her with cold indifference. Over time, I grew to despise my wife. Her presence repelled me, but despite this, she remained relentless in her efforts to win back my love. I, on the other hand, remained emotionally distant and unresponsive. I insisted that she find a part-time job that allowed her to work while our children were at school. Our daily routine involved all of us leaving the house at approximately the same time. After her workday, she would pick up the kids, return home, and prepare dinner. I would arrive home around 6 p.m., and we would have dinner together, clean up, and spend the remainder of the evening engaging with the kids, which included conversations, games, movie nights, and assisting with homework. During the weekends, I took the kids on various outings such as trips to the science center, museums, amusement parks, the zoo, swimming, hikes, and more, leaving my wife at home. We often departed in the morning and didn't return until late afternoon. She desperately desired to join us, but I preferred her not to. So both of us lied to everyone, claiming that this time alone was her mommy break and to provide her respite from her weekly responsibilities of cooking and house chores. Reflecting back, this 2-year period was the most challenging time in my life. Our circumstances took a turn one Saturday when our children spent the day with my wife's parents. I found myself in a predicament in the garage while trying to install shelving and bike racks on the wall. Despite my reluctance, I went inside the house and asked my wife for assistance. She was thrilled to help, as this was the first time in over 2 years that I had requested her company for such a task. She had recently taken a bath, exuding the clean scent of shampoo and soap. I could tell she had shaved her legs, and she was dressed in very short shorts and a midriff-bearing t-shirt. It was evident that she had intentionally dressed this way for me, as she consistently dressed provocatively whenever we were alone, although those instances were infrequent, primarily due to my choices. On previous occasions, I had pretended not to notice her attire. To install the unit, I had to slide beneath the bottom shelf, which was approximately 3.5 feet above the ground. While she stood beside me, securing the shelf against the wall, all I could see were her legs extending just beyond her belly button, and it undeniably aroused me. I had to guide her to move closer and closer to me to position the shelf correctly, and this led to both of us bursting into laughter, especially when she ended up almost right on top of me. I must confess, those last few inches were quite unnecessary. After successfully mounting the shelf, I emerged from under the bottom shelf, and we were still in stitches from laughter. She remarked, "That was fun." And without saying a word, I slowly placed my drill on the shelf, then seized her and shared a kiss. She smiled, and I took her hand, leading her up to our bedroom, where we spent the entire afternoon and evening making love, conversing, cuddling, and showering together. It marked the most incredible session we'd ever had and one of the most unforgettable days. We spent the entire afternoon and evening making love, conversing, cuddling, and showering together. It marked the most incredible session we'd ever had and one of the most unforgettable days of my life. This day marked the beginning of our second marriage, and it has been 11 years filled with love, happiness, and bliss since that moment. I couldn't have asked for a better wife and mother. Immediately following the affair, I used to obsessively think about it every waking minute, but now I can go months without it crossing my mind. We haven't discussed the affair in years, and I stopped bringing it up to her since that magical Saturday, as I felt we had left that dark time behind us. We had the perfect married life until... Update: the return of Mrs. Jones. Once again, my world was turned upside down earlier today. It's Saturday morning on September 3, 2022, and I was shopping at a large home improvement store. A woman approached me and mentioned my name. I confirmed it, and she proceeded to introduce herself with her first and last name. Her face and name didn't ring a bell, but her voice sounded vaguely familiar, though I couldn't quite place it. Then she added, "You might remember me by my former last name, Jones," and instantly I recognized her. Even though we had never met in person and had only spoken on the phone that one time, I was taken aback as I had always assumed she and her husband were around our age. However, she appeared to be much older, possibly in her late 50s. Mrs. Jones mentioned that she recognized me from some of my online photos and inquired about how things had turned out for me. I shared that my wife and I had reconciled and had been happily married ever since. Her facial expression showed surprise. Feeling awkward, the only response I could muster was, "I'm so sorry for my wife's actions." She replied, "Don't apologize. We were married to two demons." Then she proceeded to reveal details that would forever alter my life. She remarked, "You're obviously a much bigger person than me," and continued, "Once I found out he had been having an affair with her every Wednesday morning for 16 months in our own bed, there was no way I was staying with him." She went on to share, "That man cheated on me on Valentine's Day, my birthday, Christmas Eve, and our anniversary, and then came home to be with me." I was, of course, stunned by this information but chose to listen. She added, "Karma is a real force though, as his life has been nothing but turmoil since our divorce." Mrs. Jones revealed that her ex-husband was terminated from his job for conducting the affair during work hours, which she had reported. Following his firing, it was discovered that he, a vice president of sales, had been engaging in commission fraud for over 5 years, submitting false sales data. The company pressed criminal and civil charges against him and sued for restitution totaling over $240,000. Criminal charges were dropped after he promptly paid the requested restitution. The settlement and legal fees depleted a substantial portion of his divorce settlement. She explained that he had relocated to the Orlando, Florida area in an attempt to make a fresh start but ended up declaring bankruptcy. Mrs. Jones revealed that he had suffered a severe heart attack the previous year, resulting in significant damage to his heart. Consequently, he now had limited mobility, dealt with leg swelling, relied on a cane to walk, and was compelled to retire at the age of 66. He had recently turned 68, which was a 30-year age gap compared to my wife. She commented, "And now he's an isolated, financially struggling, elderly man with 2 children who despise him." She emphasized that she had never harbored ill will toward him and had always encouraged their children to maintain a healthy relationship with their father, but unfortunately, they couldn't stand him. Lastly, she mentioned that she had remarried 8 years ago and was currently happier than ever before in her life. We exchanged phone numbers, and she offered to provide me with details about the affair or copies of the emails if I ever wanted them. I expressed my gratitude, wished her well, and we parted ways. By that point, I felt emotionally numb, realizing that my wife had blatantly deceived me. Our entire second marriage had been constructed on a lie. It wasn't a brief affair. Instead, she had led a completely separate life with this individual for 16 months, engaging in intimate relations on days when our parents were looking after our children so she could claim to be busy with household chores and shopping. Rather than feeling sad, I was overwhelmed with disgust, rage, and anger, emotions I had never experienced to such an extent before. This heightened anger deeply concerned me, and I knew I couldn't return home at that moment, uncertain if I could control myself. Instead, I texted my wife, explaining that I would be doing additional shopping and grabbing something from a fast food drive-thru, indicating that I wouldn't be home for lunch. I spent the following 4 hours devising a plan on how to address my wife, outlining the steps I would take, and shared my story here to gather feedback. During this time, my wife reached out to me through phone calls and text messages, simply checking in. I informed her that I was just doing a little shopping and that I'd surprise her when I got home. She seemed somewhat suspicious and concerned, likely because I typically don't shop much, but she replied, "Okay, I love you. See you when you get here." Action plan. Confront my wife this evening, which is Saturday. Move her belongings into the spare bedroom tonight. Inform our children tomorrow. Share the news with our parents on Labor Day. Meet with an attorney on Tuesday to draft an in-house separation agreement. At the end of the 90-day period, make a decision among 3 options: reconciliation, divorce, extending the evaluation period by another 90 days. Update. I intended to provide an update last month, but a lot has been happening in both my personal and professional life lately. Firstly, on the career front, I received a promotion to Vice President of Customer Service. After working for 5 years at the internet service provider, I transitioned to a customer care manager position at a large privately held industrial company. Over the past 13 years, I've steadily climbed the corporate ladder to reach the top position in the department. My family and my employees are thrilled for me, and I'm proud that my years of hard work have been acknowledged and rewarded. This new role involves both in-state and out-of-state travel, which will serve as a welcome distraction as I navigate the personal challenges that lie ahead in the coming year or so. Now moving on to the matter at hand. I confronted my wife, and she admitted to everything. She explained that she hadn't disclosed the full story 13 years ago because she believed I would divorce her if I knew the truth. The affair persisted for 16 months. They reconnected while waiting in line at a national coffee house, which she frequented daily. Subsequently, they began meeting there every Wednesday to discuss their workplace. On their 3rd meeting, he invited her to his house to see his new exercise spin bike. She acknowledged that she knew it was wrong and had an idea of what might transpire, but she couldn't resist. She disclosed that their first encounter took place on a sofa in his basement, but afterward, they continued their liaisons in his marital bed. She then admitted that they engaged in everything and did not use protection. Regrettably, I asked for this detail, and my emotional state was shattered beyond repair. At this point, she acknowledged that despite her infidelity, she ensured I was sexually satisfied throughout the affair. She emphasized how she initiated these encounters and fulfilled all my desires. I responded by expressing how this made the situation even more repugnant and distressing. I went on to suggest that she might have or still has an underlying mental illness, as a mentally sound person wouldn't engage in such cruelty towards their spouse and family. She concurred and wept, confessing that she desperately wanted to end the affair but couldn't bring herself to do it until it was discovered, which she claimed brought her back to her senses. She asserted that she had only ever loved me and had absolutely no emotional attachment to him. I countered by stating that such a claim was completely unbelievable because it's impossible to engage in a 16-month-long affair without developing strong feelings for the other person. She maintained her denial, crying throughout our conversation, pleading for my forgiveness, and asking me to focus on the wonderful life we've built over the past 11 years. She added, "I always made sure I was a great wife and mom, even when I was having the affair." I questioned the seriousness of her statement, leaving her puzzled. I drew a comparison stating, "That's like a professional thief telling a judge, 'Judge, I've been an upstanding and law-abiding citizen over the past 16 months, except for the banks I robbed every Wednesday morning.'" I firmly asserted that she was far from being a good wife and mother during that period. In fact, she was quite the opposite. She sobbed in agreement and expressed a desire for psychiatric help and therapy. She then asked if I would support her on this journey, to which I replied that we would discuss it. When I inquired about why she chose to be with him, she cried and pleaded, Please stop saying that to me. I feel so terrible, and I've suffered mentally because of this for 13 years. I pressed her to tell me why, and she explained, I was young, impressionable, and isolated as a stay-at-home mom, and he was this mature man who was the most respected and successful figure in the company. I couldn't believe he was showing interest in me. I know it was incredibly foolish and morally wrong, but you wanted the truth. Hearing this was like a gut punch, but I thanked her for her honesty. I then confronted her, saying, "You realize you played a role in breaking up a home." She looked at me with a sorrowful, puzzled expression. I went on to inform her that the Joneses divorced shortly after their affair, and their children no longer have a relationship with him. She cried and admitted, "That's terrible. I feel so guilty for what I did." I asked, "You didn't know any of this?" She replied, "No, I completely blocked him from my mind after you confronted me." I continued, "You probably aren't aware of your former lover's current condition, are you?" She responded, "Stop calling him that. You are my lover, and you have been for 19 years and always will be." I informed her, Mr. Jones suffered a severe heart attack and is in declining health, residing in Florida." She questioned, "Why are you telling me this? Even though I don't wish harm on anyone." I replied, "I thought you might want to know about someone you were involved with." She adamantly stated, "Stop it. Stop it. I never loved him. I've moved forward and want to leave those difficult days behind." I then made a hurtful comment saying, "Well, if things don't work out for us, I'm sure he'd appreciate having his young companion back to assist him." With that, she burst into tears, rushed to our bedroom, threw herself on the bed, and cried for an hour. I felt a pang of guilt and considered apologizing, but refrained, recognizing that my comment was minor compared to what she and her former lover did to me and Mrs. Jones. I allowed her to let out her emotions and then went upstairs to say, "All right, it's time to move your belongings to the spare bedroom." She pleaded and begged, but I remained firm, and she reluctantly assisted me in relocating all of her possessions to the spare bedroom. I won't deny it was emotionally challenging. She was in tears, and I shed quite a few myself discreetly during bathroom breaks, as I didn't want to display my emotions in front of her. The conversation with our children went as well as one could hope for. Initially, my wife couldn't face them and wanted me to break the news, but then she joined us and took it upon herself to explain everything while keeping her composure. They were upset and disgusted with her, and they became very attached and concerned about me during the first couple of weeks after our talk. However, as we spent more time together discussing everything, they are gradually beginning to come to terms with the situation. They both expressed that they still love their mom deeply, but their perception of her has been forever altered, at least for now. Talking to our parents turned out to be even more challenging than I had expected. All four of them were visibly upset. Our mothers were crying heavily, which in turn brought tears to our father's eyes, and I found myself breaking down as well during both meetings. We had to pause multiple times to regain our composure. What deeply affected them was the fact that they had been looking after our children while my wife was involved with someone else. Strangely, both sets of parents carried a sense of guilt about this. They remain upset with my wife, with the exception of my mother, who softened her stance a bit. However, our fathers are utterly disgusted with her and refuse to speak to her, despite these events happening 13 years ago. Our legal separation agreement is now signed and in effect. We both decided to continue living in our house. My wife pleaded with me not to go through with it, but I explained that it was necessary. Things have been relatively calm at home. We communicate daily, and our interactions with our kids are gradually returning to normal. Although there is no intimacy between us, I have absolutely no desire for her, while she's desperate for my affection, but I remain emotionally detached. As outlined in my plan, I am committed to giving this 90-day period to make a decision, either 1, proceed with a divorce, 2, attempt reconciliation, or 3, extend the separation for more time. This may be my final update, but I might return to share what decision we make. It seems that the feedback is divided evenly between divorce and reconciliation. I want to express my gratitude to everyone here for listening and responding to my story. You may not realize how much your feedback has helped me navigate through this.